Hello, I am Rakaba18. Today I have another in-depth guide for you on Rainbow Six Extraction. We're going to be talking about Rook today. We're a good way through and more than halfway past all of the different operators. So we are coming up at the end, and thank you so much for watching these videos. We are going to start doing some tech videos and some videos on the different utility belts. Then we're going to get into some map guides, and eventually we're going to do some Maelstrom guides. So thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Comment below and let me know what you think. Who should I do an in-depth guide on next? And which map would you like to see me do a guide on first? Just let me know in the comments below. I'm also live Monday through Thursday, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time over on Twitch. Please go check out the Twitch channel at Merkaba18. There is a link in this video. And thank you so much for your support. So let's talk about Rook. He is a support class. They describe him as a team armor operator. And that is pretty much basics of it. He does provide armor for his team. So let's go through his little advancement tools here, and then we'll talk about his loadout, and then we'll show you some in-depth in-guide video or in-game video so you can see what it looks like. So Armor Pack is a pack of armor plates for the team, granting damage resistance. Anyone wearing armor always falls to down instead of KO. Very important element to that. We'll talk more about it in depth here in just a second. At level 2, he gets a VIP armor, and Rook and VIPs have armor plate applied automatically. So at level 1, you have to equip your own, and then at level 2, it'll automatically equip it. VIPs, meaning rescue targets, are automatically given armor plates, which reduces their damage taken. At level 3, primary upgrade here, you get an MP5 submachine gun and a P9 handgun. Level 4, you get a huge reduction to your damage taken by 30%. So huge benefit to that. Gear up at level 5, which is also an additional react tech, just like Gridlock we did last week, I believe. And there are a couple of operators that have gear up as well. One of the better perks in the game. Just remember that if you're using gear up and you pair it with a belt, which you could easily justify with Rook, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute, you can definitely benefit from additional boxes. And as you're going through the Maelstrom, as much utility as Rook brings by himself, having that extra grenade for every box is going to make a huge difference. So we'll talk more about that in a second. At level 6, you get a HK417, one of my favorite marksman rifles, probably second or third most damage gun in the game. And his shotgun. I don't use the shotguns very much, but there's a option for one there if you like those. At level 7, you get trauma plates, which means that all armor damage resistance is increased to 30%. So anyone that equips your armor, yourself included, is going to reduce their damage by 30%. So as you can see, the damage resistance is huge there, and Rook is going to be kind of one of the sturdier boys in the entire game. He's going to take very little damage compared to the average operator. And that also applies to your team when they are applying the armor as well. Speed increase is 25%. Not the biggest boost to speed, but it definitely helps. He's pretty slow given the number and level of operator armor he has. So keep that in mind. That 25% speed isn't huge, but it does make a big difference. Arsenal update V308, which is another one of my favorite guns, and we'll talk about the different scenarios in which you'll probably want to use that one. At level 10, you get an armor plate is automatically applied to Rook whenever he is revived. Damage resistance is increased to 40%. So that's a huge, almost half as much damage as you would if you just put his plates on. Now, there's a lot to talk about as it relates to that, and we'll get to some of it in the in-game footage. But let's go ahead and talk about what his utility provides, and then we'll talk about his weapons. So the first thing I want to tell you is that Rook is essentially, the way to think about him in the easiest sense, is he's essentially a walking revive kit that's rechargeable. Now, the thing to keep in mind, let's say you have 3 people on your team. You got to think about this separately as a group versus solo. So as a solo act, Rook is automatically going to go to knock no matter what. He's going to have a dramatically reduced amount of damage taken from the revive or from the body armor, and then if he goes down, he's going to automatically get that back up. With your team, they will also go into DBNO, and we'll show you what this looks like in the game in a minute. But what will happen is that charge will then be expended. meaning they will need to re-equip it. And Rook can provide that, provided that he has a refresh box, meaning that his ability will not automatically reapply armor to your team. It will reapply them to yourself. I apologize for that update noise there, but they will not get a reapplication if they go to DBNO. The other thing to keep in mind too is if they go down and they're knocked and you don't res them before the timer expires, they will get KO'd. And if they're surrounded by enemies and they get KO'd, they will be permanently KO'd as well. So you have to res them still. And easiest way to think about it is that they are, each time they equip the armor and each time you go down, you have a new revive kit. What that means is no one on your team needs to bring a revive kit, which frees up an entire slot for you to bring turrets, body armor, which by the way stack with his armor. And the only downside to bringing that is that it doesn't. There's no extra benefit in terms of being downed. You still only get the same like DBNO benefit. It just reduces the damage taken, at least as it applies to Rook himself. I don't believe that applies to, at the time of this video, that does not apply to your team. It does apply to him, however. So what you can then do is, let's say, bring a revive or a explosive harness. You can bring an accelerant for extra health. You can bring a rush pistol in case you want to get in and out somewhere quickly. Recon drone for intel, which can kind of double up his utility. Really useful element to his kit is bringing the recon drone, so that you're getting additional XP and providing additional utility to your team. If you're doing a really, objective heavy Maelstrom run or something like that, you can bring an auto turret if you feel like it. So he essentially frees up every single person's gear slot, and no longer are required to bring a revive kit because he's essentially going to provide that for you. I tend to also try to bring loud grenades with him because you're going to want to try to do as much damage with him as you can. He's going to be able to clear lots and lots of enemies because of the amount of damage that he does resist. And so that kind of frees him up to choose all these different grenades depending on what your needs may be. All right, so let's talk about his loadout here. P90 is a wonderful, wonderful gun, but he also has the P90 does have some decent damage, high fire rate, depending on how you equip it. You can also, this is more of like a run and gun style, lower damage. The MP3, there's tons of options. I do once in a while meme builds, so you can kind of see you can put a 2.5 or 2x scope on an MP5. Not sure why you would need to, but there it is if you feel like it. I tend to either do one of two things. I tend to bring his HK for a high damage loud option with low recoil, or I'll bring his V308 with a ton of utility and versatility. This one packs quite a punch for a fast firing gun. So my two top preferences are the HK and the V308, but those are personal preferences. I almost never use his shotgun because he does happen to have one of the best, most versatile kits in the entire game. Depending on the circumstances and what you need to do, how fast you need to fire, what your team needs you to do, he can pretty much do it all. And that's why he is probably one of the top 5 operators in the entire game, in my opinion. Because not only is his utility up there, he just brings a ton of damage reduction. Take a look at this, by the way. His armor is almost level 5, and that is before equipping the armor pack or a gear in which you bring the armor. So he takes very, very little damage. He can kind of pack, and he moves a little bit slower than the average operator, but he's just kind of all around one of the better operators. If you see him in the Maelstrom, he is going to be one of your more underrated options, in my opinion. He's just gonna do it all for you. So just keep that in mind as we go through some of this in-game footage. I'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at some of that so that you can see what it looks like in the game. All right, here we are in game with a level 10 Rook. I'm going to get into a lot of information. This can get a little bit technical and a little bit specific, so I apologize for that in advance. Please stick with me as we get through this because Rook is one of the better operators in the game, in my opinion. Not just because of his loadout, but because of the utility that he brings to the team. And so there's a lot to talk about, and I hope that you will stick through this video and watch and learn something from it. So I am bringing with me here a level 10 operator for Rook. This is all information that applies to max level. Keep that in mind. And I'm using his P9 as a silenced option. It's a pistol, basically, is the only way I can describe it. It does what it does. I mean, it shoots. It doesn't do a ton of damage. It's not going to be your main loud option. His revolver, by the way, is his other secondary is not silenceable, but it is a great loud option if you prefer to go loud and aggressive. I tend to pair it with the HK417 as my first choice, but the V308 is great if you're running and gunning and you're being much more aggressive as well. Just depends on your personal preference. And I think his gun kit is one of the best in the game. You're really not going to see anybody with a more well-rounded gun set than he does. And he has a gun for every style, for every specific place in the game. And that's why one of the reasons he's one of the best. So if you will look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen here, you'll see in my icon, you'll see the muted microphone there. That demonstrates nobody can hear me in game chat. But to the right of that looks like a little bit of a shield right on his left shoulder. That indicates that Rook has his armor equipped, and that is going to be the case for Rook at all times. Now, there are two things to keep in mind with Rook. One, he has a very different playstyle on solo than he does in a group. He is, I think, specifically designed to be utilized in a group, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. But let's get to some basics. Your team will need to equip the armor. I've went ahead and went through the trouble of deploying some already right here and then recharged it. So keep in mind, as you deploy these, you will have an empty utility or ultimate slot. You'll need to refresh it out in the world in order to get it back. Now, let's say your team equips both of these. They will also have that armor benefit and all of the things that come with it, including damage reduction, and automatically go to DBNO anytime they are downed. Now, unlike with Rook, who will automatically refresh his armor anytime he is rezzed, your team will need to get a new set of armor plates. So they both equip these, it'll disappear. And then I will need to put another one down in order for them to get that same benefit. That does not apply to Rook. That only applies to your teammates. And there's a very specific reason that's important, and I'll talk about that here in a second. As you can also see, I've went around and picked up some of the C4 caches on the map and paired with the gear up slot or gear up perk that he has from naturally leveling, and with the belt, the explosive belt, he will stack up grenades in a hurry. And so he is a great candidate for most of those boxes if you're trying to stack grenades in your group. And you have 18. You'll spawn with 7 as a default with the belt on, and then for every box after that, you'll get 7 more. So keep that in mind as you're stacking up grenades on specific operators. So what does Rook do, and why is he so good? Well, for one, he doesn't take very much damage, and then he will reduce the damage that your team takes. And the easiest way to think of him is as a walking revive kit, which will then slot out anyone else in the group from needing to bring one of those. Now, there are two circumstances, and this is where we're going to get a little bit technical, so bear with me. There are two circumstances in which you may need a revive kit on your team or playing with Rook as a solo operator. The first one is as in a solo op, like we are right now. If I go knocked, I cannot revive myself automatically. I will go to DBNO, and then if I'm on a team, for example, somebody else can come res me. But you cannot res yourself as Rook unless you have a revive kit. So it's okay to bring a revive kit in a solo op if you need it, if you need that one extra res. You only get the one because you can't use a revive kit twice, but just keep that in mind. You can do that. Now, in a group, there's almost no circumstance in which you're going to want to bring a revive kit for yourself as Rook or for anyone on your team. And the reason for that is that even in Maelstrom, the endgame content, you're going to have a very hard time finding a scenario in which you're downed twice and then need to use the revive kit. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Okay, so let's say my team and I all have our armor. I go all the way down. My team reses me as Rook. I automatically get it back. So for myself in a group with Rook, I just will almost never need one. It's really kind of a waste of a utility slot, kind of a waste of a gear slot. For your team, they will be able to go to DBNO anytime they equip your armor. And so there, you're going to be able to put one down if they expend it. Now, keep in mind, if they do go to DBNO, it will expend it, and they will need to re-equip it, as I said. But for the most part, throughout the Maelstrom, there are more utility or ultimate refresh button boxes than will often be needed, unless you're using an entire team that has a need for them. In most circumstances, you're gonna end up leaving some of them behind more than anything. Now, there's one specific circumstance that I'll walk you through that you could probably justify a revive kit, but it's so narrow that if you're doing it, you're probably having it more, you're probably one, playing with randoms and it's not going very well anyway, or two, you just probably ought to rethink your strategy, and there's just such a narrow window in which that would happen that it almost bears repeating that it's not really necessary and almost never going to happen. So let's say we're in subzone 9, this door opens, my team goes down, their armor is expended, I revive them, put one of my armor kits down for them, and they equip that, they go down again. I revive them, and then they go down again. That would automatically KO them, unless they had a revive kit. So let me repeat that one more time, just so that you can understand. So if I go out into the world there, and then my team goes down, and I revive them, and I can't put down another utility in order to give them new armor, they would then go KO'd if they don't have a revive kit. In that circumstance, you may need to, or you may want to bring one, but it's such a narrow circumstance that if you are doing that, it's probably because you're learning or because you're new to the game and not because it's such a widespread need. Now, keep that in mind. So that will free your entire team to bring explosive belts, turrets if you need them, whatever it is. You can even make a case that the armor satchel or ammo satchel is better for them in that scenario. So just remember, if you have a Rook on your team, and especially if you are playing Rook, you just don't really need a revive kit. And that lets me bring a bullet, extra gear slot for every person on the team. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that Rook will take very little damage as an operator, and he will reduce the damage taken of all of his team anytime they have that equipped. They will need to refresh it in the event that they go down and become res, though, in order to retain that armor benefit. Rook does not need to do that. Anytime he goes down, he will automatically re-equip his own armor. So that is a cool little perk for him. Now, one other thing that I'll give you a little bit of an advanced tip with, let's say, for example, I put my armor back there at the air pad, they've used it, and then they go through here, we haven't taken any damage, and I still have one in my pocket, and let's pretend this med kit is a ability refresh. I can then put this down, grab it, and I will have one here for them in the next subzone when that door opens, and then I'll have one in my back pocket, which is why you don't need a revive kit, because there's so many circumstances, if you play it right, in which you'll have more armor than you need. As long as you're not going down a ton. So let's say, for example, then we can carry that forward all the way through subzone 8 or 9, and I still got one in my back pocket. If we don't go down 3 or 4 times in those next 2 or 3 subzones without a res, the revive kit becomes useless. So Rook is a fantastic operator for that, and he will bring a ton of utility to your team and prevent them from needing to bring a revive kit. Even if you're learning the game, even if you're new to the game, he makes it so much easier. So that is just one thing to keep in mind for him. The only other thing that I will tell you about Rook, and this is a little bit of a technical added value here, is that his armor will stack for himself with the gear armor, meaning if you bring your body armor as the gear spot, it will stack for you as Rook. That does not apply to your team, however, and their ability to equip this. So if they equip that and they have the armor, it's not going to stack the same way it does for Rook. Very specific, and at the time of this, the video was shot for this, that is how it works for you. They may change that at some point in time, but it's a cool little benefit. I don't think it's the most useful benefit. I think he benefits better from the belt or some other tech or gear slots, but that's there for you if you like it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. We are coming up close to the end of these operator videos, and it's been exciting to shoot them and get them out there for you guys. Thank you for that. And if you have not yet done so, please remember to subscribe to the channel and check out my Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/Merkaba18. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again for the next one.